Yes, there's a feeling on CT that the past 12 months has been financially disappointing for many of us, and that our expectations somehow weren't met, even though 2025 was the year that Solana took over. But here's the part that most people missed while focusing on price action. Most experts think 2025 wasn't the top. It was actually the setup for something monumental. So do yourself a favor and watch this until the end, because we'll break down the 2026 alpha from people like Raoul Pal who track all the macro indicators to investors who still see Solana as a potential 10x, and of course the key narratives driving the next 12 months. After years in the trenches, the Solana ecosystem finally stepped into a completely new role. The Wall Street darling, institutional on-ramp, and for many, it became the poster child of what crypto looks like when it actually functions. Now, it didn't happen quietly. 2025 was the year of both chaos and contrast, which I think contributes to this sense of us having missed something. We saw a Memecoin circus driven by dubious players to say the least, and a presidential-scale degeneracy both in the US and in Argentina. We saw the biggest on-chain ICO crypto has ever seen. We saw historic governance votes, massive ETF success, RWAs and stablecoins exploding, and of course the long-awaited shipping of real hardware with the Solana Seeker. So 2025 will likely be the year forever remembered as the year that Solana ETFs finally arrived, yes, but while they may have always felt inevitable after the Bitcoin and Ethereum ETF approvals, we didn't quite see the same level of smooth sailing in Solana land. And here's why I think that matters. Despite a more crypto-friendly regime in Washington compared to 2024, and of course the growing rhetoric from the White House itself about making the US the crypto capital of the world, we know that Solana ETFs weren't fast-tracked. It was a slow, cautious process, and approvals only came after issuers like Bitwise managed to find creative workarounds to navigate that regulatory maze of a government shutdown. Now, the first real breakthrough, though, came a little bit earlier from RegShares, which launched a hybrid product called SSK. It combined SOL-based ETFs with direct SOL exposure. Now, this first mover advantage was significant because for nearly 3 months, SSK held somewhat of a monopoly over Solana ETF exposure. It pulled in over $400 million in inflows, while the competitors were essentially waiting on the sidelines. Then came October, which was a great month for ETFs, but a terrible month for many because of the 10/10 Black Friday event. But in the middle of the longest US government shutdown in history, Bitwise cleverly launched BSOL, which changed the entire landscape, and it triggered a new wave of SOL ETF products. Now, this really can't be understated. BSOL delivered the most successful ETF launch of the year, both in terms of volume and inflows, and we're talking about all assets, not just crypto ETFs. By the end of the year, 7 additional issuers had entered the market, and Solana ETFs recorded a historic 21-day inflow streak, collectively surpassing $747 million in assets under management. But here's the most important detail, which you can see if you go to the SolanaFloor ETF tracker. You'll see these incredible October inflows that didn't arrive during peak euphoria. They came during subdued, bearish market conditions when many believed that the cycle was already over. Roughly 100,000 SOL per day was being absorbed into these ETFs, and it's that shift which marks Solana's transition from a retail-driven narrative trade to what is essentially an institutionally tradable, yield-bearing asset today. And that's why for many, 2026 may matter even more than 2025. Now, despite the ETF euphoria, obviously wasn't all roses and daisies in 2025, and you only really have to go back to January and think of the subsequent Memecoin mania to realize that there were plenty of ups and plenty of downs, because Q1's Memecoin circus put the chain's degenerate side on display for the entire world to see on a presidential scale. The president-elect's Solana Memecoin launch divided not just the Solana ecosystem, but arguably the entire crypto industry, because yes, 500,000 net new users is great. Yes, the network's resilience being battle-tested is also great. But what wasn't necessarily great is that Trump and Melania launching meme coins seemed like a mockery of everything crypto originally stood for. What began as a cypherpunk movement based on ideals like decentralization, disintermediation, privacy, and self-custody had transformed into a political playground, with insiders and government officials orchestrating billion-dollar pump and dumps. Not great optics. And before the Solana ecosystem could even figure out if Trump's meme coin reaching a $75 billion FDV was bullish or bearish, the debate had already gotten out of hand, with people looking into political corruption and Trump earning billions through trading fees. Donald Trump and his family are busy building a crypto empire worth billions.
Billions and billions and billions.
But the sheer scale of the meme coin chaos became apparent less than a month later in February, when the Argentinian president Milei endorsed the Libra meme coin. The streets are filled with blood, anger, and FUD after the Argentinian president's retweet sent the Libra flying for a second time to over $750 million before it came crashing down again. By the time everyone realized it was Hayden Davis and Kelsier Ventures that were behind the launch, it was too late, and the damage was already done. Over 82% of the Libra supply was linked to one cluster, with many high-profile KOLs being exposed as having involvement in what was one of the largest coordinated launches of all time. SolanaFloor was part of the months-long investigation and whistleblowing, which later led to an Interpol Red Notice request for Hayden Davis, who had largely dug his own grave by acknowledging his plans to max extract in a private Telegram message which was later leaked. But 2025 wasn't just the year of Memecoin devs sniping or front-running the public, because we also saw a multi-billion-dollar wave of public companies front-running ETFs as they purchased dizzying amounts of SOL. The digital asset treasury playbook was of course popularized by Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy, which later rebranded to just Strategy, but there's a reason why a whole host of Solana DATs also emerged in quick succession, starting with Sol Strategies in January, then DeFi DevCorp joining the ranks soon after, and by November they'd acquired 2 million SOL, worth around $300 million today. By August, though, we were all debating to what extent DATs posed systemic risk to the Solana ecosystem, and whether or not the further compression of DAT MNAVs would lead to a death spiral, with millions of SOL being dumped on the open market. September, though, saw a bit of an uptick in optimism as Kyle Samani's Forward Industries raised an eye-watering $1.65 billion to buy SOL and create the market's largest Solana DAT ever, and they later announced the following.
Our aspirations is that this is a publicly traded permanent capital vehicle, and we have aspirations for this thing to become a $50 billion plus publicly traded company over the next 5 to 10 years.
But much to the disappointment of anyone who aped into DATs, by November it was crystal clear that holding DAT stocks was far worse than just holding SOL. Having said that though, Solana DATs still collectively hold over 20 million SOL valued at $2.5 billion, and by most accounts in 2026 we'll likely see a long list of mergers, acquisitions, and a wide-scale consolidation in the DAT space, so plenty to look forward to in terms of millions of SOL being deployed across Solana DeFi. And speaking of 2026, this is probably a great time to inject some much-needed optimism, because one of the most excited and anticipated airdrops we're all looking forward to is, of course, the upcoming SKR airdrop from Solana Mobile. Now, the Seeker itself made waves across crypto by recording 150,000 pre-orders, and the device does exactly what it says on the tin. It provides a secure and intuitive mobile-first crypto experience with the Seed Vault wallet, which is powered by Solflare, and a dApp store that's growing every single day. Now, the airdrop's coming as early as January 2026, so in the coming weeks, with over 30% of the SKR supply being distributed among active users in what's likely going to be the largest airdrop in recent history. Now, if you do want a rapid rundown of how to farm SKR points, then you can of course check out this guide that we made for you. And looking into 2026, we know from talking to Solana Mobile General Manager at Breakpoint that the Solana Mobile stack will be expanding. Finally, we can expect to see hardware announcements as well.
The next step for us is expanding to additional hardware.
But hardware and airdrops were just one part of the surface level story, because in 2025, Solana quietly crossed the most important technical milestone of history. We're talking, of course, about Firedancer. Tolly himself ended the year by saying we should pour one out for the beta tag, because after 3 whole years in development, Firedancer is now live on mainnet. But what we're all holding our breaths for in 2026 is of course the Alpenglow upgrade, which promises to eliminate validator costs while bringing latency down to as low as 100 milliseconds. Now, when we think back about 2025 and all the successes and how they likely shape the next 12 months, we simply have to talk about RWAs, because if late 2024 and early 2025 were defined by meme coins, then the back half of 2025 undoubtedly belonged to RWAs, which now sit at over $850 million according to RWA.xyz. Now, overall, the institutional signal has been unmistakable, because in March, Larry Fink's BlackRock deployed $1.7 billion into the Biddle Fund on Solana. Around the same time, Securitize and VanEck brought regulated real money products on chain, and they chose Solana as their settlement layer as well. But from around July onwards, we saw that it wasn't just stablecoins, but also US treasuries, tokenized stocks, yield-bearing funds, and even collectibles like Pokemon cards, all finding a home on Solana. By October, tokenized stocks had become the retail user's RWA of choice, with Remora markets and X stocks commanding over 95% of on-chain volumes across all chains. We even saw the more niche RWAs gaining traction with things like Pokemon cards, which saw millions spent on chain, once again proving that, like the Memecoin mania, once the infrastructure works properly, almost any asset can move on chain. So what's next in 2026? We now have the infrastructure for on-chain equities, money market funds, treasuries, stablecoins, capital formation, even the most niche assets out there like Pokemon cards. Memecoin mania no longer defines the chain, speculative frenzy no longer holds it back, ETFs alive, even the White House is talking about becoming the crypto capital of the world through Project Crypto. DATs, despite struggling at the moment, are looking to deploy millions of SOL across Solana DeFi. On-chain capital formation just broke records with a $4 billion ICO where roughly 75% was raised directly on-chain. I think if doing a 3-day-long live stream at Breakpoint showed us anything, it's that institutions aren't circling anymore, they're quite literally moving in. Because we've got trillion-dollar asset managers like State Street and Franklin Templeton who are already at the table, while ETF issuers like Bitwise continue to see major upside in SOL. Bitwise CIO Matt Hogan still calls SOL a potential 10x.
It's just a really easy bet for institutions. When you're betting on Solana as an institution, you're making two bets. Bet number one is that stablecoins and tokenization will grow. You have the Treasury Secretary saying stablecoins will 12x in the next 4 years. There's $680 million of tokenized stocks today. The US equity market is $68 trillion. That's 100,000x. That's extraordinarily bullish. So institutions look at that and say it's fait accompli. Stablecoins and tokenization are going to grow. I want to invest in that. And then on the Solana side, you get this second bet, which is that this better, faster, cheaper ecosystem is going to get a bigger share. If you can get two bets at once, that's why it's resonated so much with institutions.
Raoul Pal also reminds us of the $10 trillion debt refinancing that will likely boost liquidity and accelerate this thesis even more. But beyond retail and beyond institutions, Solana enters 2026 as crypto's central hub for on-chain trading, for capital formation, for revenue generation, and of course for developer activity. So when you zoom out and you think about 2026, what we're looking at is a healthy and growing network. And as we head into 2026, SolanaFloor is leveling up too, with new live stream shows, new segments, bigger guests, deeper coverage across the Solana ecosystem and of crypto more broadly, including where you can get the best DeFi yields in the coming years. So please do us a favor and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'll see you in 2026 for more of the very latest.